Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome back to my Superman series of movie reviews. And today, we are now finally to this movie. Today, we are reviewing the 2006 superhero movie, Superman Returns, directed by Bryan Singer, which I own in this Superman 5 movie collection, which this collection comes with the first four Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and then the 2006 movie Superman Returns, which Superman Returns is supposed to be a direct sequel to Superman 2, ignoring the third and fourth movie, but since Christopher Reeve died, they had to cast a different actor to play Superman, which is Brandon Routh. But now, in terms of my thoughts on the previous movies, I really love, when it comes to the first two Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, I love, I love Superman the movie from 1978. I think that is one of the best superhero movies of all time. And Superman the movie from 1978 is often considered one of the greatest movies of all time, and I 100% agree with that. And the sequel, Superman 2 from 1981, is considered to be a great sequel. And I know a lot of people didn't like it. It's not a perfect movie, but I like the third Superman movie for what it was. It was nice to see Richard Pryor in there. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, though, no. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, that movie was absolute garbage. I already ranted on that. You can see all my thoughts. Just check back on that rant I did recently. And now we are to the 2006 movie Superman Returns. And like I said, the first two Superman movies starring Christopher Reeve, they were massive box office hits, and they were, Superman the movie and Superman 2 from 1978 and 1981 were big hits at the box office, but they were also movies that received positive reviews from critics and audiences, and they were really popular movies. The third one was a box office disappointment and got mixed reviews by critics. But then in 1987, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace was a movie that received terrible reviews from critics and audiences and was one of the biggest box office bombs of the 80s. In fact, the backlash for Superman 4 was so bad, it killed any interest in Superman movies until Superman Returns came out in 2006, so almost 20 years later. That's not a good thing. But with how popular the Superman animated series was in the 1990s, there were definitely attempts to make a new Superman movie. Like, at this point, everyone is familiar with it, but in 1996, Tim Burton was hired to direct a Superman movie called Superman Lives, and the movie was going to star Nicolas Cage as Superman, but that movie ended up being canceled because of the $300 million budget and the overall production problems that movie was suffering. And in all honesty, I think that was for the best, because I like Nicolas Cage as an actor, but personally, I cannot see him as Superman. In fact, if you had to choose an actor in the 1990s to play Superman, I think in the 1990s, Brendan Fraser would have been a better fit, honestly, but that's just me. And then after that, they tried to make another Superman movie so in 2004, J.J. Abrams, he wrote a script. Now, in 2004, J.J. Abrams, he wrote a script to a Superman movie called Superman Flyby, which there were a few different actors who auditioned for that movie. Brendan Fraser was one of the actors who auditioned for Superman. There were also some other actors there were also actors like Paul Walker, and I know originally, there were two different actors they had in mind for Lex Luthor. They either wanted Vin Diesel or Robert Downey Jr., and I like Robert Downey Jr. as an actor, but honestly, I don't see him as Lex Luthor. I really don't. I'm glad he decided to play Iron Man instead. But then that movie fell through, and then Superman Returns finally came out in 2006, and Bryan Singer, who at this point was a very popular director, because at this point, Bryan Singer, he directed popular movies like, The Unusual Suspects and the first two X-Men movies, which were very popular movies. And so because of that, in 2005, he was hired to direct Superman Returns. And The movie released in 2006. Now, as I said, the first two Christopher Reeve Superman movies received very positive reviews from critics and audiences and are considered some of the best superhero movies of all time, but 3 and 4 received negative reviews. Well, how was Superman Returns received? Superman Returns received mixed reviews from critics and audiences, and the movie was a decent box office hit, but due to the lackluster reception, they decided not to do a sequel to this movie, and then, of course, they rebooted Superman with the 2013 movie Man of Steel, which that'll be the next movie review. Now, as for my overall reaction to Superman Returns, this movie was, it was okay, like, it was alright. Is this a movie I would ever watch again? Probably not. But did I hate the movie? Not necessarily. I thought this movie was honestly just a mixed bag, but there are, however, aspects of this movie I do like, which we will cover throughout the course of the review, and now, I know there are some YouTubers who do like this movie and find it rather underrated, like there's this YouTuber, Eric D. Plays, he finds this movie, he told me that he likes this movie, and hey, if you think this movie is underrated, great, awesome. I also know that there's some other people who find it underrated, like, I know the Italian Stallion 51, a movie reviewer I like, I know he did not mind this movie. I know that Rambo Rap for Life, I know he didn't mind this movie. My stepdad Ron, he likes this movie, so, but me, again, did I hate this movie? No. But is this something I would watch again? Probably not. I just thought it was a middle-of-the-road type of comic book movie. But there are some really good aspects to this movie. But anyways, what is the plot to Superman Returns from 2006? The plot of the movie is as follows. While Lex Luthor plots to destroy him once and for all, the Man of Steel, played by Brandon Routh, returns after a 5-year absence to a much-changed world. Lois Lane, played by Kate Bosworth, has moved on with her life, and society has to learn to survive without him. Superman must find a way to reconnect with her and find his place in a world that may no longer need him. So that's the plot to Superman Returns, and again, I didn't hate this movie. I thought it was okay, but it is on the weaker side of Superman movies for me, to be perfectly honest. I personally think the biggest problem with this movie is the fact that Warner Bros. decided to make this movie a direct sequel to the first two Christopher Reeve Superman movies, ignoring the timeline of the other sequels. Honestly, I think that's the biggest problem with this movie, because if you're making a legacy sequel to beloved movies, but the original actor passed away and you're casting him with a different actor, I honestly kind of feel like you're setting up people's expectations too high. But again, there is aspects about this movie I do like. Brandon Routh, he is the weakest Superman actor by default, but I don't think he was terrible in this movie. I don't think he gave a really bad performance. I thought his performance was decent, but he is definitely by far the weakest on-screen Superman. But he does do a decent job at he does look the part of Christopher Reeve. I'll give him that. And, he does try, the best he can with the material he's given. But, So this movie starts off where this movie takes place in the 1980s, but again, it takes place about 5 years after the events of Superman 2, and now Superman decided to leave the planet, so he could basically go off on his own and, do his own thing, but then, he has to come back to Earth because Lex Luthor, the bad guy played by Kevin Spacey, is out to destroy the world. And I will say, there is some really good production design in this movie, especially at the beginning of this movie, where the main bad guy of the movie, Lex Luthor, played by Kevin Spacey, he decides to go to the Fortress of Solitude, Superman's hideout and stuff like that. And he basically plays a projector, and then there's the whole projector with Superman's space dad, Jor-El, talking, saying, I died and stuff like that, given his backstory, etc. But, the bad guy, Lex Luthor, played by Kevin Spacey, is kind of amused by it. And I will say, another positive I will give about this movie, I do like the opening scene of this movie where they even got John Williams, the guy who did the score to the 1978 Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, as well as the music to Star Wars. They got that music composer to come back to do the music to this movie, which I thought, okay, that was cool. And I like that part at the beginning of the movie where where they have like the title card, Superman Returns, with the classic music by John Williams, and I think that's rather cool. And I think that the direction by Bryan Singer in this movie, it's okay. It's there. Like, I did not think his direction was awful, but I didn't think it was amazing either. And to be honest, as much as I like Bryan Singer as a director with the first two X-Men movies and The Unusual Suspects, I don't necessarily think he was the right choice to do a Superman movie at this time, if I'm being perfectly honest. Because again, like I said, after all, this movie, it is supposed to be a legacy sequel to the Christopher Reeve movies. Okay, here's the thing. The dark tone in the movie Man of Steel, I expect, because Man of Steel is not connected to the Christopher Reeve movies. That's its own thing. But when you have it connected to the Christopher Reeve movies, I just don't think the dark tone really works as well, because the Christopher Reeve Superman movies were pretty lighthearted. And I don't know, I just don't really think Bryan Singer's style of directing was really the right choice for that. But there's also some other action scenes I do enjoy in this movie, like early on, for example. There is a bunch of passengers on an airplane, and Lois Lane just so happens to be on the airplane, and the airplane is basically one of the jet turbines of the airplane, blows up, but there's like another jet on top of it that's like pushing the weight down, but Superman has to come in and save the day and stuff like that, and the whole part where the airplane is falling, but it's about to fall into a baseball field, but then Superman stops the airplane and puts it down. Okay, I thought that was a rather cool sequence to the movie, and like I said, I do think Brandon Routh, for the material he's given, again, he's no Christopher Reeve, but I think he does a decent job acting-wise with the material he is given. But one of my biggest gripes with this movie is the CGI. I think the CGI in this movie is absolutely terrible. I mean, the CGI wasn't really that great when this movie came out in 2006, and it definitely doesn't really hold up all that well now, to be perfectly honest. The CGI is pretty poor in this movie, even if it's during good action scenes. Also, another thing, Kate Bosworth, I honestly did not think that Kate Bosworth was a good Lois Lane, because like I said, this movie is supposed to be a direct sequel to the first two Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and look, I get it. They were not able to get Margot Kidder back because she was too old at this rate, and like I said, this movie is supposed to take place about this movie, despite the fact that it came out in 2006, it's supposed to be a direct sequel to the second Superman movie starring Christopher Reeve. But, and look, I know that Superman 2 came out in 1981, so you have to recast. I understand that, but honestly, I just did not think that she was a very good Lois Lane, and, I thought that her performance was honestly pretty flat and stuff like that, but again, there is more ideas I do like to this movie. I like how throughout this movie, I like the fact that Lois Lane is married to a husband, and she has a little kid of her own now. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's something. But without Superman, I thought that was cool. I thought that was something a little different. And again, as much, I'm gonna say this, as as much as I hate Kevin Spacey as a person, he actually was a pretty good Lex Luthor. Now, granted, he's no Gene Hackman, because you're never gonna top Gene Hackman from the original Superman movie, but he's certainly much better than Jesse Eisenberg was in Batman vs. Superman, because yeah, Jesse Eisenberg was a terrible casting choice for Lex Luthor, and easily the worst on-screen Lex Luthor. And again, I have not seen the new Superman movie directed by James Gunn that came out on July 11th. I have not seen that movie yet, but I'll be seeing that movie in a couple days here. I heard a lot of really good things about that movie, but I'm getting off track here. And there also is other action scenes I do like in the movie too. Like, for example, when one of Lex Luthor's henchmen he basically takes like a machine gun, but like a huge ammo machine gun, and he's just firing bullets left and right at police cars. But then once the police officers are on top of the building, the bad guy is about to shoot the bullets at the officers, but Superman gets in the way. And I like the scene where the bullet bounces off his eye. I'm like, that's a pretty cool scene. But again, one of my biggest problems with this movie, other than the fact that it feels lifeless compared to the Christopher Reeve movies, I just don't think that Kate Bosworth was really a good Lois Lane. But another issue I have with this movie, besides the CGI and the fact that I think Kate Bosworth was not a good Lois Lane, this movie was way too long. This movie did not need to be 2 hours and 35 minutes long. Like, why was it that long? Now, yes, granted, I know that the 1978 superhero movie, Superman the movie from 1978 with Christopher Reeve, yes, I know that movie is 2 hours and 25 minutes, but you want to know why it works with that movie? Because that's actually a good movie, and it actually is entertaining. And for a movie that's over 2 hours, Superman the movie, it flies by at a very good pace, and it is not boring at all. This, I thought that there were too many scenes that were too slow for me in this movie to get into, honestly. And again, just not a very fast-paced movie either, which doesn't help. But near the end of the movie, Lex Luthor, he manages to stab Superman in the back with a kryptonite crystal. Superman falls into the water, and then he basically has to rescue Lois Lane, her child, and her husband, and, lifts the boat out of the water. And unfortunately, her husband is played by James Marsden, who I don't think that James Marsden is a bad actor. I just don't like him as a person, because James Marsden is the same type of guy who defended Dan Schneider. So, yeah, not the best guy, to put it lightly. But then, near the end of the movie, Superman is able to defeat the bad guy Lex Luthor, and I like the part near the end of the movie where Superman, he basically takes like a really giant, he takes like a giant piece of ground, but like with a rock underneath it, and it's like it's huge. Like, it's gotta be at least, if I had to guess how big it is, at least 400 feet, maybe, give or take, but he lifts it out the ground and launches it into space, but then Superman's tired by it and he falls to Earth. Like, I thought that was not a bad sequence, but again, just the biggest problems I have with the movie is this movie is rather slow-paced. The CGI sucks in this movie, to be honest. It really doesn't hold up. Kate Bosworth, she's a decent actress in some stuff I've seen, but I just don't really think she was that good of a Lois Lane, to be perfectly honest. And this whole, trying to make it tied to the first two movies, again, I understand what they were going for, but I honestly just don't think that this should have been tied to the Christopher Reeve movies. Like, I honestly think this should have just been its own Superman movie, not tied to those. I think the movie honestly would have worked much better with it. And then the whole sequel tease at the end, it's like, okay, but, we never got a sequel and we're not going to get one, so that feels pointless at the end, but yeah. Again, at the end of the day, did I hate this movie? No. But did I like it? No. at the end of the day, Superman Returns is a mixed bag of a movie that I appreciate the ambition it's going for, but I don't think it fully lands in the execution department. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Superman Returns a 5.5 out of 10. And next up is my review of Man of Steel, which this might be controversial to say, but I much prefer that movie, to be perfectly honest. And the first two Christopher Reeve movies. But we'll take a look at Man of Steel next. Later. Bye-bye.